Welcome back to the Human Settings. I am so glad you're joining us on YouTube today. Have you ever noticed how you can have, like, your entire life perfectly, almost ruthlessly under control?
Oh, absolutely. Like you're just running on all cylinders.
Right. You know the feeling. You've got this fantastic career trajectory, maybe a morning routine that would make a Navy SEAL jealous.
Uh-huh. And the flawlessly color-coded spreadsheets for literally everything.
Yes, the spreadsheets, finances, meal prep, you name it. You are the rock. You're that reliable, stable one in your friend group that everyone calls when their lives are just completely falling apart.
You're the crisis manager for everyone else.
Exactly. But then the absolute second you step into a romantic relationship, it's like a hidden trapdoor suddenly springs open right beneath your feet
It really is. It's like all that executive function just evaporates into thin air.
overnight.
Yeah.
You suddenly feel wildly insecure or anxiously attached or just totally out of character.
Yeah, you find yourself staring at your phone in the dark.
Right, sending a triple text at 2 in the morning. And you're just sitting there wondering, who is this person taking over my brain?
And what did they do with the functional adult I used to be?
Yeah,
I hear that all the time. It is a universally jarring experience.
it really is. So that is exactly the phenomenon we are unpacking today. We're doing a deep dive into the work of psychologist Sandra Ferrer.
Yes, she is a brilliant expert in attachment and relational trauma.
She is. And our mission today is to explore this massive, heavy amount of unconscious material that just absolutely sabotages our intimacies.
We are essentially descending into the psychological basement of our minds.
Right. To figure out why our adult love lives are secretly being run by our childhood survival instincts.
And we'll also look at why modern society's obsession with extreme independence might actually be, well, a massive collective trauma response.
Yeah, and the neurological reasons your brain actually tricks you into repeating the exact same relationship mistakes over and over.
To really grasp what Freire is talking about, though, we have to visualize the architecture of the human psyche.
Okay, let's unpack this with a visual. Think of your psyche like a beautifully renovated, highly expensive house.
A very nice house.
Exactly. You have this spotless, sunlit living room. You invite people in, you host dinner parties, you show off the pristine hardwood floors.
The mid-century modern furniture. Everything looks spectacular.
Right. But underneath that flawless living room, there is a dark, locked basement.
And it is completely full of unresolved leaks, exposed wiring, and foundational cracks.
Yeah. And as long as people stay in the living room, as long as your relationships remain superficial or friendly or just professional, everything is totally fine.
But the closer someone gets to you, the heavier their footsteps become on those floorboards.
Exactly. And eventually the floor gives way, or that unresolved water from the basement starts seeping up and ruining the expensive rugs.
And we so often fall into the trap of believing that if we just, buy nicer furniture for the living room, it'll fix things.
Like getting a promotion or going to the gym 6 days a week.
Right. Or reading 50 more self-optimization books. We think the basement will magically fix itself.
But human psychology simply does not work that way, does it?
No, it doesn't. The basement requires a descent. And Ferrer grounds this entire theoretical framework in a deeply personal autobiographical story.
It's a heartbreaking story, honestly, but so incredibly common.
It perfectly illustrates how this basement gets constructed in the first place. She calls it the parable of the perfect child.
Yeah, so she describes this 8-year-old girl living a happy, remarkably normal life with her parents and her younger brother.
And then an unimaginable tragedy strikes the family system.
Right. Her mother falls ill and passes away. And the mother was like the emotional anchor of the house.
So her loss just leaves this massive gaping void.
But what Ferrer asks us to look at isn't just the loss itself, but the reaction of this specific 8-year-old girl.
Which is so crucial. Because she doesn't throw tantrums. She doesn't weep uncontrollably on the floor.
Right, she doesn't start failing her classes or acting out at school, which you would totally expect.
Instead, this 8-year-old implicitly reads the emotional room of her shattered household.
Wow. I mean, think about the sheer cognitive and emotional leap required for a child to do that.
It is a brilliant, but truly tragic adaptation. She surveys her environment, right?
Yeah, and she sees a father who is entirely consumed by his own devastating grief.
A man who has suddenly and unwillingly become a single parent to 2 young children.
And purely through intuition and this raw biological survival instinct, this little girl realizes something heavy.
She realizes that if she were to express her own profound sadness, if she were to demand comfort or cry for her mother, It would completely break her father.
Because it would be an emotional burden he simply does not have the bandwidth to carry right then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So she adapts. She makes an unconscious choice to completely suppress her own emotional needs.
She swallows her own grief so her father doesn't have to choke on it.
That's a powerful way to put it. She becomes the emotional container for her father, rather than the father being the container for her.
She essentially reverses the entire parent-child dynamic without making a single sound.
And from the outside, the neighborhood, the teachers, the extended family,
Oh, they probably looked at this little girl and thought, wow, what a trooper. She is so strong.
she is so incredibly mature for her age. They absolutely did.
And that validation just heavily reinforces the adaptation.
Yes. So fast forward a few decades, that 8-year-old grows up.
And she becomes an adult woman who is highly resolute, incredibly secure in her professional life.
A person of decisive action. She is hyper-functional,
She has this uncanny ability to anticipate problems before they even happen.
which of course is a skill she honed by having to constantly monitor the unpredictable emotional weather of her grieving household as a child.
Right, she was trained to do that. But here is the glaring, painful contradiction that finally brings her into therapy.
Despite being this highly effective visionary woman, her romantic life is an absolute disaster.
It's crazy. She constantly, predictably, almost magnetically, chooses romantic partners who are the exact opposite of her.
She finds herself in relationships with men who are immature, directionless, infantile.
Totally incapable of commitment or just like financially and emotionally chaotic.
And she sits there, completely baffled by her own choices.
She's asking, how is this happening? I have a master's degree. I run a company. I know I want an equal partner.
Why do I keep ending up with these guys who have absolutely no drive?
So what's the revelation there when she finally opens the door to her own basement?
The psychological reality is that she is unconsciously attracted to the very part of herself that she was never, ever allowed to be.
Oh, wow. Because she had to grow up instantly at age 8.
Exactly. She had to take her own inner child, her own irresponsibility, her own innate need for play.
And messiness and care, and she just locked it straight into the dark.
So as an adult, she is drawn like a moth to a flame to people who openly, shamelessly embody those exile traits.
That is wild. And her therapist eventually tells her something that shifts her entire paradigm, right?
Yes, the therapist says, you are a woman of hyperfunctioning. You have learned how to survive beautifully, but you never learn how to live.
Surviving versus living, that distinction just stops you in your tracks.
It really does. It reframes her entire existence.
But, I look at this and I see a massive societal paradox.
Thought so?
Well, we are talking about this as a trauma response, right? As a tragedy of a lost childhood. But society absolutely loves this kind of person.
Oh, we heavily reward this specific adaptation.
Yes, we look at the hyper-functional, zero-drama, completely self-reliant employee or friend, and we applaud them as the ultimate success story.
We give them promotions, we praise their stoicism, we put them on magazine covers.
Exactly. Aren't we basically rewarding the trauma response and blinding them to the fact that their competence is actually a survival shield?
We are actively monetizing their trauma, yes. We elevate these defensive adaptations to virtues.
Especially in the corporate world, right?
Oh, the corporate world thrives on people whose primary psychological driver is to ensure no one is ever disappointed in them.
That is so true. So if you are listening to this right now and you're looking at your own massive list of achievement,
Or flawless logistical planning.
yeah, your uncanny ability to handle everyone else's crises without ever breaking a sweat, you need to ask yourself a really difficult question.
Are those actions stemming from a genuine, joyful passion for life?
Or are they a highly sophisticated, exhausting defense mechanism designed to ensure no one ever realizes you actually need to be taken care of?
It's a tough pill to swallow.
So if our childhood adaptations build this hidden, flooded basement, how does our modern dating culture interact with it?
That's where it gets really complicated.
Because from everything Ferrer outlines, it seems like the current dating landscape actually encourages us to reinforce the trap door.
It completely does. It
Yeah.
tells us to throw away the key, buy a nicer rug, and pretend we don't even have a subconscious.
Yeah, so how does that work?
Well, the modern cultural framework is deeply complicit in this avoidance. Ferrer brings in the work of Lola Lopez Mondejar here.
Okay, specifically her concept of the invulnerables invertebrados, right? The invulnerable and the invertebrate.
Exactly. We are looking at a stark, almost violent contrast between how our grandparents approached relationships and how we operate today.
Right. Older generations often built relationships on sacrifice, long-term growth, and the mutual co-construction of a life.
Now, Ferrer is very careful to caveat this, and it's important. We needed to evolve from that era.
For sure. Much of that older model was built on silent endurance, submission, lack of financial independence for women.
And sometimes outright normalized abuse.
Yeah, nobody in their right mind is suggesting we go back to the 1950s where people just suffered in absolute silence for 50 years for the sake of an appearance.
Definitely not. But pendulums never stop in the healthy middle, do they?
Never. They swing from one extreme to the absolute opposite extreme.
Because past generations endured too much friction and too much pain. Our generation has decided we refuse to endure any friction whatsoever.
We have swung into what Mondejar describes as an ode to joy culture.
We've developed a collective phobia of the natural, inevitable friction that comes with two separate humans trying to merge their lives.
It's like we want the warmth of the roaring fire, but we absolutely refuse to chop the wood or carry the logs or deal with the smoke in our eyes.
That's a perfect analogy. And because of this phobia of discomfort, we start using romantic partners as what psychoanalysts call narcissistic objects.
Okay, let's break down that term, narcissistic object, because it sounds like clinical jargon for just being a jerk.
It does sound harsh, but it's actually much more insidious and normalized than that.
Ferrer compares it to a very specific type of parenting, doesn't she?
Yes. Imagine a parent who desperately wanted to be a concert pianist but failed. So they forced their child to practice piano for 6 hours a day.
The child ceases to be an independent, complex human being.
Right. The child simply becomes an instrument, an object used to fill a void in the parent's psyche.
And we are doing the exact same thing to each other on dating apps.
We are instrumentalizing human beings. We approach dating not with the open curiosity of discovering another complex, flawed person.
Instead, it's with a highly rigid checklist designed to seamlessly fill our own specific emotional or logistical voids.
We want someone who fits perfectly into our Sunday brunch schedule, who likes exactly the same movies.
Who provides the exact ratio of banter to physical affection we desire, but we strictly demand that this person never actually inconveniences us.
Exactly. We want a perfectly curated accessory to our already hyperfunctional lives.
We adopt this mantra of, I love you today, but tomorrow who knows?
And we package this as being mindful or living in the present.
Which is such a spin. It is actually a profound, terrifying refusal to commit to the vulnerability of an unknown future.
And here is where biology crashes the modern dating party.
We can tell ourselves whatever intellectual stories we want about being empowered, solo poly, hyper-independent badasses.
But Ferrer points out a brutal reality check, drawing on Mario Salvador's work. Connection is a biological imperative.
We are mammals. We are not like solitary reptiles who lay eggs and wander off into the desert alone.
No, we come pre-installed with a specific biological instruction manual.
And that manual dictates that our nervous system requires another nervous system to regulate properly.
The global lockdowns provided undeniable, tragic proof of this. We tried to hack our biology.
We really did. We tried to replace genuine, three-dimensional, pheromone-rich social connection with two-dimensional screens.
Pixelated Zoom calls and endless algorithmic scrolling.
And the result wasn't just boredom. It was a massive documented spike in clinical depression, anxiety, and physiological deterioration.
Just as the human body requires a specific temperature range to survive. You know, we suffer tissue damage at -10 degrees and heat stroke at 110 degrees.
Right. Our mammalian nervous systems require a specific baseline of intimate connection to regulate themselves.
You simply cannot outsmart millions of years of mammalian evolution with a mindfulness app, a really nice apartment, and a solo trip to Bali.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The analogy Ferrer uses for this modern predicament is one of my absolute favorites.
It is brilliant.
Trying to be intimate with someone while simultaneously protecting yourself from any possible friction.
It's like trying to feel the warmth of someone's skin while you are wearing two incredibly thick wool sweaters.
It's just a brilliantly vivid image. Those two thick wool sweaters are your defense mechanisms.
They are your hyper-independence, your refusal to compromise your routine.
Your endless roster of casual dating options that keep you from having to focus on one person.
And it works, right? If the other person accidentally scratches you or pulls away or says something a little thoughtless,
you won't feel the pain because the wool sweaters protect you. You have successfully avoided getting hurt.
But you have also completely, entirely blocked any possibility of feeling the pleasure, the warmth, the heartbeat, and the depth of true connection.
You're standing in a sauna wearing a parka wondering why you don't feel relaxed.
Exactly. And it makes you really question the culturally dominant narrative of the empowered single.
We celebrate people who have a masterclass in solo travel, who can build IKEA furniture completely alone.
Who boast about their extreme autonomy online.
But is that actually the pinnacle of self-actualization, or is it just the most elaborate, socially acceptable, well-marketed avoidance mechanism ever invented?
In many cases, Ferrer argues, it is the latter. We have engineered a society full of single people in relationships.
What does that mean, practically?
These are individuals who might technically have a partner, who might cohabitate or even be legally married, but who never actually take off the wool sweaters.
They keep separate finances, separate emotional lives, and separate exit strategies always pre-planned.
They never allow the other person to become truly structurally important to their lives.
Because acknowledging that structural dependence means acknowledging their own biological vulnerability.
And vulnerability implies the possibility of catastrophic loss.
So let's play this out. Let's say you're listening to this and you have a moment of clarity. You say, okay, I'm taking off the sweaters. I am sweating to death in this parka.
I'm going to let someone into the house and I'm going to let them walk around.
What happens next? Why does it feel like the absolute second we drop our defenses and let someone in, everything instantly goes haywire?
We either panic, we push them away, or we entirely lose our minds over something trivial.
Like how they load the dishwasher.
Right. To understand that whiplash, we have to look at the mechanics of the human brain. Specifically, how the predictive brain interacts with implicit memory.
Okay, break that down.
The brain is, at its core, a predictive machine. It fundamentally hates surprises.
Because processing novel, unexpected situations from scratch burns an immense amount of caloric energy, right?
Yes. So, from the moment we are born, the brain creates neural root schemas of reality, basically cognitive shortcuts based on our past experiences.
It does this to maintain a sense of control, safety, and energy efficiency.
Exactly. So when we connect intimately with someone, we aren't just seeing them objectively as they are in the present moment.
We are essentially projecting our entire historical database onto them, like a movie screen.
And specifically, we project the missing experiences of our childhood.
This is where Ferrer offers a crucial reframing of how we understand trauma.
Yes, because when we hear the word trauma, our minds usually go to catastrophic, horrific events.
Like abuse, violence, or massive neglect.
But relational trauma is very often about what you needed as a developing mammal, but fundamentally didn't get.
It is the absence of attunement. It is the silent void where comfort should have been.
She gives this heartbreakingly subtle example of how this forms. Imagine a child who grows up in a logistically flawless home.
From the outside, it's a postcard. They go to the best schools, the meals are always hot and on time.
The clothes are perfectly ironed, there is money in the bank.
But one day, this child comes home from school feeling incredibly sad because they were excluded by a friend group.
The child's face is just a mask of melancholy.
And the parent, perhaps stressed from a high-powered job or maybe just emotionally unequipped because of their own upbringing, looks at the child and dismissively says, "Oh, stop crying. You have everything you need. You're upset over nonsense."
As adults, we can rationalize that interaction. We might say the parent was just exhausted or lacking tools.
But an 8-year-old child does not have the cognitive capacity to put their parents' behavior into a broader sociological context.
A child will never judge the parent. They will always judge themselves.
Because their literal survival depends on the parent being a competent caregiver, so the parent must be right.
The child implicitly learns a devastating biological lesson.
My sadness is annoying.
Expressing my true feelings causes the person I rely on for survival to reject me and pull away.
So what is the child's solution? They pack up that sadness, they walk it right down the stairs into the basement, they lock the heavy door, and they throw away the key.
That unmet need for comfort, for attunement, goes straight into the dark.
And this is the absolute kicker that ruins our adult lives. Just because it is locked in the basement doesn't mean it ceases to exist.
No, it sits there, it ferments, and it waits. And this leads to what Ferrer calls implicit memory overriding the present moment.
This is the mechanism behind emotional flashbacks, right?
Yes. When an implicit memory is triggered, you are no longer reacting to the present situation. Your body is biologically, hormonally reliving the past.
Ferrer used a fantastic, incredibly relatable example to illustrate this.
The lunch exclusion.
Yes, imagine you are 42 years old, you are at work in a nice office, you get tied up on a client phone call.
Meanwhile, your coworkers decide to head down to the local cafe for the daily menu of the day lunch, and they leave without waiting for you.
They don't mean any harm, they are just hungry and on a tight schedule.
But you get off the phone, you realize they left, and suddenly you are hit with an 11 out of 10 level of devastating, crushing anxiety.
Your chest tightens, your stomach drops, and you feel feelings of total, profound rejection.
You go home later and you vent to your partner or your friends, and they look at you like you have three heads.
They say, it's just lunch, it's not a big deal, they'll bring you a sandwich.
And rationally, your 42-year-old brain knows it isn't a big deal. You can buy your own sandwich.
But your nervous system isn't 42 years old in that moment. Your nervous system has been entirely hijacked by implicit memory.
The trigger in the present, being left behind by coworkers, has perfectly, symmetrically aligned with the exact shape of the original abandonment wound in the basement.
That is so wild. And this phenomenon creates what is known as the dynamic of the colander heart, which is just, it's one of the most poignant analogies I've ever heard.
It's so frustrating, but so accurate. When that basement door is blown wide open by a trigger, your heart essentially transforms into a colander.
A kitchen strainer.
Yeah. You enter a romantic relationship, and your partner could be doing literally everything right.
They could be pouring love, security, timely text messages, verbal affirmations, and physical affection into you all day long.
They are a waterfall of secure attachment.
But because your heart has these unhealed, gaping holes from the past, all that love just drains right out the bottom onto the floor.
It is never, ever enough to fill the vessel.
Because the reality is, you aren't just asking your partner to love the 40-year-old you.
You are entirely, unconsciously demanding that your partner provide emotional back pay for decades of neglect that the child in the basement endured.
That inner child is down there screaming, now it's my turn, now you have to fix this, prove you won't leave me like they did.
And the partner, who just wanted to date a 40-year-old adult and go to the movies, becomes completely overwhelmed and terrified.
They feel like no matter what they do, no matter how much love they pour in, the counter always resets to zero the very next morning.
It is deeply exhausting for everyone involved, and it leads to a truly baffling behavioral loop in dating.
Yes, getting into these familiar toxic dynamics to try and heal the basement. The analogy from the source material for this is incredible.
The Titanic analogy.
Right. It's like putting the movie Titanic into your DVD player every single day, sitting on your couch with a bowl of popcorn, watching the ship sail toward the iceberg.
And genuinely hoping that this time the captain turns left and Leonardo DiCaprio doesn't freeze to death.
It perfectly, absurdly encapsulates the psychological compulsion to repeat.
The brain actively seeks the familiar dynamic because it already knows the neural route. It knows how the movie ends.
But the wounded child inside hopes that this time, by finding someone who is emotionally unavailable, distant, or critical, just like their parent was, they can finally crack the code.
They believe if they can just perform well enough to win the love of this unavailable person, they will finally heal the original wound.
It is a biological setup for inevitable heartbreak. You cannot change the ending of a DVD.
No, you can't.
But let me challenge this because it seems so counter-evolutionary.
What do you mean?
Well, if the human brain is so incredibly highly evolved, if we can build quantum computers and send rovers to Mars, why is it so astonishingly lazy and self-destructive when it comes to love?
That's the million-dollar question.
Why does the brain prefer the familiar nightmare of the Titanic over the unfamiliar fairy tale of a healthy, secure relationship?
Because you have to remember that to the primitive predictive parts of the brain, the amygdala, the brainstem, unfamiliar does not equal better.
Unfamiliar equals dangerous.
Exactly. Even if a healthy, secure, communicative partner is objectively vastly better for your well-being, your nervous system doesn't have a map for that terrain.
It doesn't know how to predict a secure person's behavior, which makes it feel out of control.
A chaotic, unavailable partner is painful, absolutely. But it is the pain you are an expert at surviving.
You have all the apps downloaded for that specific chaotic operating system.
A secure partner requires a whole new biological software update. And to the primitive brain, rewriting the code feels existentially terrifying. It feels like a loss of self.
If you're listening to this, I want you to really think about your own life for a second. Think of a recent argument you had with a partner or a close friend or a colleague.
An argument where your emotional reaction felt completely, undeniably disproportionate to the actual event.
Right, like you lost your mind over a tone of voice or a minor change in plans. Ask yourself, was that reaction actually about the dirty dishes in the sink?
Was it really about the missed text message? Or was that an 11 out of 10 flashback?
Who's actually fighting in that moment? The adult you or the child in the basement demanding back pay?
Identifying that distinction, catching the flashback in real time, is the first monumental step toward changing the pattern.
But as Ferrer notes in her clinical experience, awareness alone isn't enough to stop the train, is it?
No, because we are dealing with incredibly entrenched automated defense mechanisms. In fact, she states that the number one demand she sees in relationship therapy isn't, how do I find a partner?
It is people sitting on the couch asking, how do I overcome my own defense mechanisms? How do I stop pushing good people away?
It's like a civil war inside the mind. People feel entirely torn in half.
On one side, you have a part of you that desperately yearns for love, intimacy, connection, and to be truly seen.
But on the other side, you have this militant Garcian part of your psyche that aggressively distrusts everyone.
It assumes all intimacy ends in pain and essentially stands in front of the basement door holding a shotgun.
And the crucial insight here, perhaps the most counterintuitive part of the entire healing process, is that we must not hate these defensive mechanisms.
We must not go to war with our own guardians. It only makes them fight harder.
We have to pause and understand that in the past, these mechanisms were highly adaptive, brilliantly creative, and incredibly intelligent.
Let's use the example from the source material to make this really concrete. Imagine you are one of 8 children in a bustling, chaotic household.
Your parents are working multiple jobs, they are totally overwhelmed, financially stressed, and there's simply zero bandwidth for your emotional needs.
If you, as a young child in that specific environment, kept demanding attention, crying, seeking attunement, and asking for help with your feelings,
You would be met with constant rejection, anger, or at best, sheer neglect.
and that repeated rejection would be psychologically devastating. It would destroy your self-worth.
So what is the most brilliant, adaptive thing your young plastic brain can do to survive that environment intact?
It emotionally detaches. It completely dissociates.
You learn to play quietly by yourself in the corner. You literally cut the neurological wire between your emotional needs and your conscious awareness.
Because in that specific historical context, the guardian that shut down your feelings and made you invisible was your greatest ally.
It saved you from daily agony. It allowed you to survive your childhood.
But now you are 35 years old. You are sitting across from a wonderful, safe person at a candlelit dinner who leans in and genuinely wants to know how you feel.
And your guardian steps in, perceives the intimacy as a threat, cuts the wire, and you just freeze up.
You dissociate. You suddenly pick a fight about politics, or you become hyper-perfectionistic about the restaurant service, or you make an excuse to leave early.
What saved your life at age 8 is now actively ruining your adult life.
This is where the smartphone app analogy becomes incredibly useful for visualizing the solution.
Think of that childhood defense mechanism, the dissociation, the perfectionism, the emotional wall, as a survival app you downloaded decades ago.
Back then, it worked flawlessly. It was the exact code you needed.
But now, decades later, the entire operating system of your life has changed.
You aren't a helpless child trapped in a chaotic house of 8 kids anymore. You are a powerful, autonomous adult with choices.
But that old, outdated app is still running in the background, consuming all your battery and glitching the whole phone.
But the fix isn't violent. You don't throw the phone against the wall, and you don't scream at the app for existing.
Exactly. You acknowledge it, you thank the app for keeping you safe when you needed it, and then you update it.
You negotiate with the internal protector. You have a dialogue with it.
You tell it, I appreciate what you did for us, but we have more resources now. We can handle a little bit of vulnerability. You can dial your threat assessment back from a 10 to a 4.
To do this practically in the heat of the moment, Ferrer talks about developing what is called the witness self, or the yo observador.
The witness self. It is a calm, neutral, profoundly wise part of your consciousness.
It's the part of you that isn't drowning in the turbulent ocean of emotion, but is standing safely on the shore, watching the waves crash.
Yes. When you get triggered, when the emotional souffle rises, as she puts it, because activated wounds are incredibly loud and messy, the witness self does not act out.
It does not send the angry text. It steps back and simply observes the internal weather.
It says, wow, my abandonment wound is really flared up right now. Look at how my avoidant protector is desperately trying to convince me to break up with this person before I even know if the relationship works.
But this introduces a really tricky dilemma, especially in the modern dating landscape.
Oh, absolutely.
If your witness self is trying to observe things calmly, how do you tell the difference between a genuine, objective red flag in a new partner and your own guardian just setting off a false car alarm because it's terrified of intimacy?
That is the crux of modern relational anxiety.
How do you know if you should actually run for the hills or if you should stay, breathe, and update the app?
The difference usually lies in the physiological sensation and the pattern of the internal narrative.
Okay. What does a genuine red flag feel like?
A genuine red flag, a real threat, usually produces a clear, grounded, almost quiet sense of, this is unacceptable behavior, I need to leave.
And a false alarm.
A false alarm from your guardian usually feels frantic, absolute, highly energized, and heavily tied to past narratives.
Yeah.
It is accompanied by a disproportionate urge to flee based on a very minor infraction.
However, discerning this difference requires an environment anchored in reality. You need a baseline of truth to evaluate your feelings.
And unfortunately, as Ferrer points out, there are specific dynamics in modern dating where our baseline reality is directly and intentionally attacked.
Making the witness self almost impossible to maintain. Which brings us to a much darker, more insidious side of the modern relational landscape.
Yes, if we are already struggling to navigate our own flooded basements and false alarms, it becomes infinitely harder when the person we are dating is actively laying psychological landmines.
The source material tackles two incredibly pervasive forms of modern relational violence: gaslighting and ghosting.
Let's start with gaslighting. The term has been heavily commodified and thrown around casually on social media.
Usually to describe someone just, like, disagreeing with you.
Right, but its clinical reality is deeply insidious. Gaslighting is an invisible, silent manipulation.
It is a systematic, prolonged process where one person makes another person fundamentally doubt their own perceptions, their own memory, and ultimately their own sanity.
The example Ferrer gives is so mundane, which is exactly what makes it terrifying. It doesn't start with grand conspiracies.
Imagine you are out with a partner and you stop to get a coffee. You make polite, standard small talk with the barista. How's your day going? Crazy weather we're having.
Nothing inappropriate, just basic human pleasantries.
But later, your jealous partner relentlessly accuses you of aggressive flirting.
You know you weren't flirting. You know your intention.
But they keep chipping away at you with absolute conviction, telling you that your behavior was inappropriate, that you lacked boundaries, that everyone in the shop saw what you were doing and felt uncomfortable.
If this happens once, it's just a bizarre argument. But gaslighting is a constant drip, drip, drip of water on stone.
Over time, through sheer repetition and emotional force, the victim starts to bend.
They think, well, they seem so sure. Maybe I am too friendly. Maybe I did cross a line. Maybe my perception of my own behavior is flawed.
They are slowly despoiled of their own internal security. Their witness self is blinded.
But the source material, citing Dr. Robin Stern, points out a dynamic that is tough to swallow, but necessary to understand.
The gaslighting tango requires two dancers.
Now, this isn't victim blaming. It's not saying the victim deserves it. It's an analysis of the psychological lock and key mechanism that allows the manipulation to take root.
Right. To successfully execute the tango, it requires a manipulator who fundamentally needs to dominate and subordinate someone else in order to feel powerful.
They cannot handle a symmetrical, equal relationship because equality makes them feel insignificant and out of control.
But crucially, it also requires a partner who desperately needs the manipulator's approval.
If you do not fundamentally need the manipulator's validation to feel okay about yourself, their gaslighting has absolutely no power over you.
You simply look at them, realize they are severely distorting reality, and you walk out the door.
It is the deep-seated need for their approval, often stemming right back to that unhealed basement wound, that desperate hope that this time the parent figure will validate you, that keeps the victim engaged in the tango.
So how do you break the spell? If you are trapped in a funhouse mirror of distorted reality where up is down and your own memory is weaponized against you, how do you find the exit?
The ultimate defense, according to Ferrer, is the valid interlocutor.
The valid interlocutor, objective friends, a community, a therapist.
People completely outside of the romantic relationship who have clear judgment, who care about you.
And who can look at the situation and say, no, You are not crazy. I know you. That behavior from your partner is completely unacceptable and abusive.
And there is a massive flashing red warning sign here for anyone listening.
If you ever find yourself intentionally hiding details of your relationship from your closest friends,
If you are actively omitting the arguments or softening the harsh things your partner said because you know your friends will be horrified if they heard the truth.
your nervous system already knows you are in danger. You are isolating yourself to protect the illusion of the relationship. You are cutting off your valid interlocutors.
Which perfectly transitions into the other form of modern relational violence, one that is entirely enabled by our cultural isolation.
Ghosting. Disappearing without a trace, without a single word of explanation after establishing a mutual connection.
Ferrer does not mince words here. She doesn't call it a modern dating quirk. She calls ghosting an act of emotional violence.
And I have to point out a massive cultural contradiction here that drives me crazy. We live in an era that preaches extreme personal responsibility.
We are constantly inundated with messaging telling people, do the work, heal your trauma, go to therapy, take ownership of your triggers.
But simultaneously, society gives people a total, unquestioned, free pass to ghost others under the highly weaponized therapeutic guise of protecting my peace.
Or guarding my boundaries, or I just need to hold space for myself.
It is a profound, almost cynical misuse of therapeutic language to justify basic cowardice.
Ghosting fundamentally stems from an absolute inability to sustain emotional intensity.
The person who ghosts cannot handle the physiological discomfort of looking someone in the eye, or even the minor discomfort of sending a definitive text message and saying, I am no longer interested, and I know this rejection will hurt you.
It requires a certain level of emotional density, maturity, and grounding to witness someone else's disappointment and hold it without crumbling yourself.
They treat human beings like browser tabs. When the tab gets too complicated or starts playing an annoying video or requires too much processing power, they just click the X and close it without a second thought.
And the cultural shift that enables this is fascinating. Ferrer cites Eva Illouz's book, The End of Love, to contrast the digital age with the past, and it explains why this behavior is suddenly ubiquitous.
Illouz brings up the vital metaphor of the village square.
Think about how human courtship operated for thousands of years. In a small physical community, a village, if you courted someone, went on several dates, made promises about the future, and then abruptly vanished without a word, there were immediate consequences.
Severe, tangible social consequences. Your reputation in the village square would be ruined by Sunday morning.
You would be publicly marked by the community as dishonorable, untrustworthy, and unsafe.
You couldn't just swipe to the next person because there are only 5 single people in the village and they all talk to each other at the market.
The social fabric itself enforced a baseline of nobility, honor, and accountability.
But today, the endless anonymity of dating apps, Instagram, and massive urban environments has completely erased that social necessity.
We are effectively anonymous. If you ghost someone, you don't face their friends in the village square.
You just seamlessly move on to the next algorithmically generated face in a completely different social circle across the city.
There are absolutely no structural consequences for your actions.
So what do we do with that? It means that in the absence of the village square, we have to enforce our own honor.
As Ferrer insists, adults must take responsibility for the consequences of the signals they emit.
If you act like you are building a future with someone, if you introduce them to your friends, if you create an expectation of intimacy, you are responsible for the emotional weight of those actions.
You cannot just vanish and claim it is for your own mental health. It requires returning to a foundational level of human decency.
It requires recognizing that the person on the other side of the screen is not an NPC, not a browser tab, but a complex mammal with a nervous system that will be deeply, painfully deregulated by your sudden disappearance.
But listening to all of this, if we recap what we've covered, the basement's full of unhealed childhood trauma, the colander hearts bleeding out love, the terrifying mechanics of gaslighting, and the endless, anonymous minefield of ghosting.
It really begs a depressing question. Is it even worth it?
Right. Is seeking a partner in the modern world just setting ourselves up for inevitable failure, exhaustion, and pain?
Does the very act of wanting love inherently make us weak and susceptible to manipulation?
This brings us to a crucial pivot in the discussion, where we must dismantle a deeply pervasive modern cliché.
The anatomy of desire and the myth of the one.
We constantly hear the platitude, love only comes when you stop looking for it.
Or the even more punishing idea, You have to be perfectly, entirely happy, completely alone before you can ever be with someone else.
Which honestly sounds incredibly exhausting and mathematically impossible.
It implies that desiring connection is somehow a character flaw. It implies that if you feel lonely, you are failing at being an adult.
But Ferrer completely debunks this. She says that desiring a partner is a wonderful, beautiful, and fundamentally brave thing to admit.
Especially in a society that aggressively fetishizes extreme stoic individualism.
Desiring a partner is the healthiest, most biologically aligned impulse you can have. The problem, as she brilliantly articulates, isn't desire. The problem is starvation.
Okay, that is a huge distinction. Let's explore the mechanics of desire versus starvation.
Think about it like going to the grocery store. When you desire a good meal, you can walk into the store, look at the aisles, make deliberate choices based on what sounds good, and enjoy the process of cooking.
If they don't have the specific ingredient you want, you aren't devastated. You just make something else or go to a different store.
But when you go to the grocery store starving, when you haven't eaten in 3 days, you will rip open a bag of chips in the checkout line.
You will consume anything, even if it is toxic, even if it makes you sick, and you will consume it desperately.
When a person is emotionally starving, other people can literally subconsciously smell the desperation on them.
Because intuitively, the other person realizes what you are actually asking of them. You aren't just inviting them into your life to share a pleasant meal as equals.
You are handing them a flashlight, pointing them to the dark, flooded, terrifying basement of your childhood, and demanding that they go down there and single-handedly rescue the wounded, exiled child.
You are asking them to be the narcissistic object of your ultimate lifelong repair.
And a healthy, secure person will instinctively refuse that job. They will feel suffocated by the enormity of the demand, the impossible expectation that they must flawlessly fulfill every unmet need you have ever had, and they will flee.
Leaving you, ironically, alone and still starving. So what is the solution? How do we stop starving so we can start desiring healthily?
The analogy she uses here is wonderful. You have to invite the exiled child in your basement up to the living room for a snack.
It is a profound act of internal self-parenting. You have to sit down with your own unmet needs.
You have to use that witness self to listen to that internal child, validate their pain, and offer them the comfort they never got.
If you provide that internal attunement, if you give them a snack, rather than ignoring them until they're starving, you take the massive, crushing pressure off your external relationships.
You stop demanding that your partner supply absolutely everything.
And this deeply connects to the actual biology of how we relate. True connection, finding a partner and building intimacy, can only happen in a very specific biological state.
Ferrer touches on nervous system states, specifically regarding the vagus nerve and polyvagal theory.
Essentially, your nervous system has different gears. You cannot truly connect with another human being if you are in a state of sympathetic activation.
Meaning, your brain perceives a threat, and you are in fight, flight, hypervigilance, and desperation.
When you are activated, your biology literally shuts down the social engagement system.
Your heart rate spikes, your focus narrows to survival, and you physically lose the ability to accurately read subtle facial cues or hear the calming tones in someone's voice.
Every neutral comment sounds like a criticism. You are biologically incapable of intimacy in that gear.
Nor can you connect if you are in the opposite extreme, a state of dorsal vagal deactivation.
Deactivation is what so many of us do after a brutally stressful day. We come home completely exhausted, overwhelmed by the threat response, and our nervous system just pulls the emergency brake.
We check out, we numb ourselves, we stare at a screen for 4 hours, totally dissociated from our bodies.
You might be physically sitting right next to your partner on the couch, but biologically you are a million miles away, locked behind an ice wall.
True connection only occurs in what is called the ventral vagal state. This is a state of physiological calm, safety, and groundedness.
Your heart rate is steady, your social engagement system is online.
When you are in ventral, you are naturally creative, you are spontaneous, you have a sense of humor, and you are open to the world.
And ironically, the best way to enter that state is often by letting go of the desperate grip on the romantic outcome.
It is why people so often meet their partners when they are engaged in hobbies they love, entirely unconcerned with finding a mate in that exact moment.
They are relaxed, they are in ventral, and therefore they are incredibly magnetic.
And when they do meet someone from that grounded place, Ferrer insists we have to throw away another massive, toxic Hollywood cliché.
The myth of the one. The idea that there is one single, predestined soulmate out of 8 billion people, And if you screw it up or if they leave, you are doomed to wander the earth alone forever.
Ferrer entirely dismantles this romanticized anxiety. She suggests a much more dynamic, realistic, and evolutionary view of love.
Relationships aren't about finding a singular puzzle piece that locks you in forever and completes you perfectly.
Relationships are, in her words, limited editions.
Limited editions. That is such a liberating, pressure-relieving concept.
It truly is. Every profound relationship you enter is uniquely tailored to help you explore and experience a very specific part of yourself at a specific time in your life's evolution.
A partner might draw out a polarity in you that you never knew existed. They might teach you how to be softer or how to be more assertive.
You learn, you grow, you trigger each other's basements, you heal what you can, and sometimes that specific limited edition runs its course.
The growth ends, the paths diverge, the relationship ends.
And society conditions us to view that ending as a massive, shameful failure. We say, oh, it didn't last forever, they got divorced, so it was a waste of time, a failed relationship.
But psychologically, if you learn from it, it isn't a failure at all. The ending of that relationship frees you.
It means you have evolved through the experience, and you are now free to find a new person who compatibilizes with the new version of you.
The version of you that has a slightly cleaner basement, a more updated set of defense apps, and a more robust witness self.
It's a beautiful way to look at our romantic histories. We are constantly told to build this totally complete, perfectly fulfilling solo life, to be a fortress of independence.
But as Ferrer asks, are we actually building a vibrant life to eventually share with someone? Or are we just pretending we're perfectly happy while secretly hoping a magical painter shows up one day to color in a life that currently consists only of commuting, working, and sleeping?
Ferrer actually flips a classic proverb on its head to make her final point. We always say, better to be alone than in bad company.
That's the mantra of the empowered single.
But she argues that as mammals, as biological creatures wired for connection, it's actually better to be well accompanied than alone.
We are designed to co-regulate. We are designed to share the burden of our nervous systems with others.
A life perfectly managed, perfectly shielded, but entirely devoid of the messy, unpredictable, beautiful friction of true intimacy is a life only half lived.
As we wrap up this deep dive on the human settings, it is crucial to think about how we take all of this profound knowledge out of the basement and bring it into the light of our everyday lives.
To summarize our journey today, we've explored the dark basements of our unexpressed, unmet childhood needs, and how the parable of the perfect child shows us that our greatest strengths are often our most elaborate defenses.
We've examined the modern dangers of wearing too thick wool sweaters to avoid the cold of intimacy, while simultaneously blocking all the warmth.
We've broken down why our predictive brains make us rewatch the Titanic, the absolute necessity of updating our outdated emotional defense apps with the witness self.
And why true connection requires taking a genuine friction-filled risk as a biological mammal navigating a highly disconnected, anonymous digital world.
And the real takeaway here, the so what's for you listening right now, is that this deep dive isn't just about romantic dating. These principles govern your entire existence.
These invisible psychological forces, these implicit memories and colander hearts, are driving your reactions in the workplace when your boss gives you slightly ambiguous feedback.
They dictate your patience, or lack thereof, with your family during the holidays.
And they govern the thoughts that race through your head in those quiet, vulnerable moments when the screen is off and you are entirely alone.
The way you do intimacy is, ultimately, the way you do life.
So I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we've discussed today. Ferrer brilliantly argued that every relationship is a limited edition, custom-built to help you experience a specific part of yourself.
Building on that, think about the person who frustrated, hurt, or disappointed you the absolute most recently.
What specific, unupdated app in your own emotional programming were they perfectly designed to expose?
Instead of just harboring resentment and wishing they had never entered your life, what happens if you view them as the universe's most aggressive, uncompromising IT diagnostic tool?
They were sent to reveal exactly which door in your basement you finally, truly need to unlock. Because until you find the courage to go down there, sit with the exiled child, and fix the leak, the water is just going to keep ruining the beautiful hardwood floors of your perfectly controlled life.